I was changing the bulb on the porch light, the one that's been flickering for months because no one else around here bothers to notice the small things, when she stepped out like it was just another Tuesday evening. Rachel stood there, arms crossed, that fake serenity she puts on when she's about to say something she's already rehearsed. "I'm in love with someone else," she said, just like that, like she was commenting on the weather. "It's been going on for a while." I didn't drop the bulb, didn't curse, didn't ask who. I screwed it in, flicked the switch to check the glow, then looked at her and said the first thing that came to mind. "Perfect." That one word knocked the breath out of her like I'd slapped her. "What?" She blinked. I wiped my hands on the rag I keep in my back pocket for greasy tools and walked past her into the house. "You're not angry?" she called after me. I paused at the hallway. "No, just give me some space." Then I went into the guest room and shut the door behind me. No yelling, no begging, no questions. Just a lock clicking softly into place, something she didn't expect. And, honestly, neither did I. Here's the thing. When you've been married for 20 years, you learn to hear the subtext. And when a woman like Rachel says she's in love, she's not confessing. She's justifying. She already made her choice long before she told me. That conversation wasn't about honesty. It was about testing my reaction. She expected to see me unravel, collapse like some sad, bald idiot with a drawer full of anniversary cards and fading family photos. But I didn't, because deep down, I'd been waiting for this moment, not hoping, not scheming, just quietly preparing, the way a man learns to do when years of small humiliations pile up like dirty laundry no one ever washes. And before we go any further, yeah, this story's going to go places. So if you're one of the 90% who reads and scrolls without hitting subscribe, maybe this is your moment. It helps us more than you think and keeps stories like this coming. Really, it matters. Now back to Rachel. She didn't knock on the door that night. She didn't even try to fake concern. I think she mistook my silence for emotional death. "He's just shutting down," she probably texted her lover, who I assume has a name like Greg or Tyler, something that sounds like a man who wears bracelets made of boat rope and drinks overpriced mezcal. Whatever. Let's call him Ethan. They always end up being Ethans. The guest room smelled like cedar and dust, boxes of old tax records, my backup laptop, and the antique dresser her aunt gave us that she hated. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan and wondering how many times she rehearsed that little performance, the calm voice, the poised body language, probably practiced in front of the mirror between yoga poses and Pinterest boards titled New Beginnings. But here's what she didn't know. She didn't know that I noticed when her perfume changed 6 months ago, something fruitier, younger, desperate. She didn't know I saw the second wine glass in the dishwasher every other Friday when she said she was just watching Netflix. She didn't know I paid the cell phone bill, and while I never checked her messages, I did see that mysterious spike in late-night data use. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the shift. The moment her declaration left her lips, the playing field changed. I was no longer the oblivious husband. I was the man she underestimated. Again, she thought she was in control, that I would either crumble or cling, that I would rage or grovel, but instead, I reached for something far more dangerous: acceptance. Because acceptance doesn't mean defeat, it means clarity. And clarity is where plans begin. By morning, I made my coffee like always, black, strong, the way Rachel hates. I didn't say a word when she breezed into the kitchen wearing leggings and fake cheer. "You okay?" she asked, smiling just a little too wide, like a nurse checking on a sedated patient. "Great," I said, sipping slowly. "Really peaceful sleep." She blinked again, trying to read the sarcasm. It's always fun when they start second-guessing their own manipulations. "You sure?" she pressed. "Because I know that was a lot to—" "Rachel," I interrupted, "you made your move. I'm just adjusting my pieces." That one made her stop chewing her granola bar. I walked out to the garage. That morning, I started clearing out a corner. My tools, my spare boxes, that old lockbox she always assumed had fishing gear. It didn't. It held documents, a flash drive, copies of things I never deleted, things she forgot she signed. The game had started. And unlike her, I didn't need a cheerleader or backup. I just needed time. And she just gave me the perfect excuse to take it. Rachel started dressing like a woman who just discovered Instagram. Bright colors, tighter fits, newer shoes. Not inappropriate, just different, calculated, the kind of calculated that said, look what you missed out on, even if no one had said anything. She came home later and later, usually humming. Wine night with the girls became a quick dinner with Mark and Jenna, or just one drink after the workshop. Every time the smile lingered on her lips like she was doing something daring and romantic, not pathetic and cliche. I kept mowing the lawn, trimming the hedges. Sunday mornings, I polished the truck I barely drove anymore just to be out of the house. On Tuesdays, I started going to church again, not for salvation, I've got no illusions about being forgiven, but because silence inside stained glass hits different when you're planning a quiet war. My brother Alan noticed the difference first. We had lunch at some backwater diner just off Road 18, cheap coffee, paper menus, the works. He looked me over and said, "You look calm, suspiciously calm." "Just cleaning house," I told him. He laughed. "You mean the actual house, or—" I didn't answer. Meanwhile, Rachel was giddy. That kind of giddy you only see in people who think they're about to win something they didn't earn. She started leaving makeup on the vanity again after years of keeping it in her drawer. New shampoo, that citrusy stuff that filled the whole bathroom like an air freshener in heat. Her phone, once guarded like a vault, now sat face up on the kitchen island. She wanted me to see the silence, wanted me to know I wasn't being texted anymore. One night I passed her in the hallway and she said, "You don't even ask where I've been anymore." "Do I need to?" I replied, not slowing down. She chuckled, shaking her head like I was being passive-aggressive, but she missed the point. I wasn't being anything. I just stopped playing. To her sister, she bragged. I heard it one afternoon while pretending to fix the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, an excuse that let me be near the vent that carried sound from the kitchen. "He's just done," she said. "It's weird. He moved to the guest room, and it's like he checked out. No yelling, no crying. It's kind of a relief, honestly." Her sister asked something muffled. No divorce yet. He hasn't brought it up, but honestly, I think he's too embarrassed. Or maybe too tired. Either way, I think he knows it's over." Embarrassed? That part made me laugh. I'd been called many things in this life, but embarrassed by her? No, more like observant. Because while Rachel shopped for sundresses and smiled at her phone, I was reorganizing file drawers, the ones she never touched, because papers bored her unless they had numbers with dollar signs. Our house had been refinanced under my name after we married, a move she supported because she said financial stuff stresses me out. Same with our vehicles, our living trust, our joint savings, which wasn't as joint as she thought, because years ago, I started shifting funds into something else, not offshore, legal, just strategic. One particular Sunday while she was at yoga, I installed a deadbolt on the office door. She saw it later that night and blinked like she hadn't expected it. "What's with the lock?" she asked casually, holding her smoothie. "Organizing documents," I replied. "Didn't want the dogs getting in." We didn't have dogs. Haven't for 5 years. She squinted, realizing the lie was deliberate and didn't press. Every night I scanned a few more documents, old utility bills, car titles, her medical expenses. Yes, I kept copies. And then the real stuff. The prenup, our trust agreement, her signed consent forms from when I opened that secondary account just for emergencies. They were all in a folder labeled tax stuff. No one ever touches the tax stuff. Rachel's lover, Ethan, as I'd come to confirm via a glimpse of a receipt she carelessly left in her coat pocket, was apparently a creative consultant for a tech startup. Translation, a broke dreamer with a gym membership and no 401k. She had chosen instability disguised as excitement, a man who would talk about living in the moment while borrowing gas money. The best part? She thought I was losing. That every lawn I mowed, every casserole I accepted with a polite nod, was me giving up. But there's a reason poker's played with a straight face. One night, she came home later than usual. I was in bed, reading. She leaned in the doorway like she wanted a reaction. "Late meeting," she said. I looked up, marked my page, and replied, "I hope it was productive." Her mouth tightened. That wasn't the line she expected. She left. Rachel believed silence meant surrender. What she didn't understand, what people like her never understand, is that some men don't scream, some men don't beg. We build, and by the time they hear the hammering, it's already too late. 2 weeks after her grand declaration, Rachel finally ventured into the guest room. She didn't knock. Just pushed the door open like she still had a claim to every square inch of the house, like walking into someone else's space was her God-given marital right. I was sitting on the bed, laptop balanced on my knees, adjusting some files on a spreadsheet that would never see her eyes. She tilted her head. "You've been quiet." I looked up. "You've been busy." She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Are you seeing someone?" There it was, the test, the bait, the low-stakes accusation disguised as casual interest. She wasn't worried I'd moved on. She was worried I hadn't collapsed yet. I smiled, not the warm kind, but the kind people give when they're 3 steps ahead in a chess match and pretending to think. "No, just organizing." She frowned slightly. "Organizing what?" I closed the laptop softly. Not like a man hiding something, like a man done with a task. "Our transition." She let out a short, barked laugh, mocking, high-pitched, brittle at the end. "There's no need for that yet. I haven't made a final decision." That last part, it wasn't a slip, it was a power play. She wanted to remind me she was still the one holding the detonator, that her little affair didn't count until she decided it did. I held her gaze. "You already did. I'm just catching up." Her face didn't fall, but it shifted, just enough to register the realization that I wasn't bluffing, I wasn't breaking, and I definitely wasn't waiting. She left without another word. No sarcasm, no quip, just silence, and the soft padding of socked feet on hardwood as she walked away. Later that evening, I found her in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through recipes on her tablet like she'd suddenly become inspired to cook again. The air was thick with unspoken questions. I poured myself a glass of water, took a slow sip, and walked out without saying a word. She followed me with her eyes, and when I turned the corner, I heard her move toward the den. 5 seconds later, a pause. The laptop was gone. The desk drawer, empty, the bookshelves still full of fake motivation titles she never read, remained untouched, and the office door across the hall, locked, deadbolt, industrial. She hadn't even noticed I swapped it out. The next morning, she asked while buttering her toast, "Why'd you move your laptop?" "I needed quiet," I replied. She waited, hoping I'd elaborate. I didn't. "Michael," she said, testing my name like it might unlock something. "You're acting strange." I shrugged. "You told me we're on different paths. I'm just making mine cleaner." She tried to dismiss the comment with a laugh, but it didn't land. Control had been her currency for years. She spoke softly, planned softly, cheated softly. She was used to emotional leverage, silent suffering, polite withdrawal, tears. But not this, not composure, not indifference wrapped around a loaded phrase like "our transition." And she certainly wasn't prepared for me to operate like she wasn't the center of the plan anymore. What she didn't realize was I'd already stopped thinking like a husband. I'd started thinking like a strategist. Because marriage teaches you patterns, routines, habits, loopholes. I knew which drawer she hid her jewelry receipts in. I knew what browser she used when she didn't want her history saved. I knew how often she ignored our financial meetings and which documents she signed without reading because she trusted I'd handle the details. She was never a villain, just careless. With her love, with me, with the very foundation she thought I'd never challenge. So I sat in that guest room, documents spread across the bed like pieces to a puzzle she didn't even know existed. Not revenge, not yet, just clarity, just control, returning to the one person in this house who never once tried to hold it. Until now. The next night she tried a different approach. She brought a bottle of wine into the living room and poured 2 glasses. "Just talk?" she asked. I took one sip, said thank you, and went back to the office, locked the door behind me, let her wonder what I was organizing. Because what Rachel never understood is that silence isn't surrender. It's the sound of a storm gathering. It arrived on a Tuesday. Rachel usually didn't bother with mail. Bills bored her. Envelopes with windows went straight to the kitchen counter to die a slow death under takeout menus and yoga class flyers. But this one was different, official looking, stamped with the county seal, hand addressed, thick. I knew the moment she opened it. I was outside watering the azaleas that she never remembered to prune. The door creaked, then slammed harder than necessary. I gave it 10 seconds. 11. 12. "Michael!" she snapped, storming down the steps like a prosecutor at closing arguments. I let the hose keep running. Calm hands, soft soil, just enough tension to make her think she was interrupting something that mattered. You moved the house? She said, voice tight, high-pitched. Not rage, uncertainty disguised as authority. What is this? She held the letter out like it was radioactive. I turned the water off slowly, faced her. I bought it before we married, I said evenly. I just corrected the paperwork. You put it in a trust, in your name. I nodded. That's right. Her eyes narrowed. That's not a correction. That's theft. Feel free to ask your lawyer, I said, walking past her. I've already spoken to mine. She followed me. You think this is funny? You think you can just move things around behind my back like I'm some stranger? You made yourself one, I said, almost kindly. She flinched, then went cold. I'll take legal action. I looked at her the way a man looks at a chessboard he's already won. You'll find the prenup airtight. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The prenup was years ago, she said. Things have changed. I gave her the shrug she'd given me when she told me she was in love with someone else. Not the law. She called him that night. I didn't need to hear the full conversation to know. Her voice dropped an octave, suddenly fragile, looking for backup. He's up to something, I heard through the vent. He's locking doors, moving paperwork. I just got a letter from the county. A pause, then, yes, the house. I thought it was ours. Another pause, then laughter. Not hers, his. You said he was passive, he chuckled. Let him play his games. It's probably just pride. He'll get tired. Of course, Ethan, yes, I confirmed the name, would say that. The man drives a leased car with someone else's name on the insurance and gives unsolicited financial advice to women during wine tastings. He wouldn't recognize strategy if it audited him. What Rachel didn't understand, what Ethan definitely didn't, is that I don't get tired. That night, I made chicken stir-fry. I used to cook every Friday. She used to call it comfort food night. She didn't eat, just sat at the table, arms folded, still staring at that county envelope. It's not about the house, she finally muttered. I looked up from my plate. Of course it's not. It's about what you assumed. She blinked. What do you mean? You assumed I'd sit quietly, wait, fade away, maybe even thank you for your honesty. She didn't respond. Instead, I'm taking inventory. You can't just undo everything, she said, but it sounded more like a question than a threat. I finished my bite, chewed slowly. I'm not undoing anything. I'm adjusting the forecast. She left the table before I finished the meal. Later that week, she tried to get into the office. She rattled the handle, found it locked, and tried again later when I was in the shower. I had installed a secondary lock on the inside, silent, flush, invisible unless you knew where to look. When I stepped out of the bathroom, she was waiting, towel over her shoulder, eyes hard. Why are you locking yourself in like that? I don't like interruptions, I said, drying my hands. Since when? Since you redefined everything. She didn't like that. She turned, muttering something about control freaks, and slammed the bedroom door behind her. But here's the truth she was beginning to feel in her bones. Control is only threatening when it slips out of your hand and lands in someone else's. She had grown used to quiet dominance, emotional veto power, the moral high ground of dissatisfaction. Now she stood on sand, because I wasn't taking revenge. I was building my perimeter. She didn't know how wide it reached yet, and that's what scared her. The phone rang at 8:04 a.m. on a Sunday. I was in the garage oiling the hinges on the side door, not because they needed it, but because I liked the rhythm. Rachel picked up in the kitchen, not even bothering to disguise the irritation in her voice when she said, "Hello?" Then came the shouting. Not hers, her sister's. I heard it through the wall. Why did Michael pull funding from Dad's care account? Silence, more shouting. He missed his physical therapy twice this week because the facility says the payments stopped. Are you out of your mind? I heard Rachel scramble. Cabinets opening. Drawer yanked, papers rustling. She was looking for something. Proof maybe, or just a moment to catch up with a reality she hadn't realized had shifted under her feet. Then footsteps. Fast. Angry. She threw open the garage door like she was trying to knock it off the hinges. You pulled out of my father's account? She demanded. I didn't look up from the hinge. He's your family, I said calmly. You've been paying that bill for years. I did, until 2 weeks ago. Why now? I stood, wiped my hands on the old shop rag I kept tucked into my back pocket, and met her eyes for the first time that morning. Because I won't subsidize a family that laughs behind my back. Her face twisted. What are you talking about? I heard your sister, I said. At the barbecue last fall, Michael doesn't even know she's already moved on. He still thinks mowing the lawn makes him a man. Ring a bell? She froze. I was holding your mother's potato salad when she said it, I added. She laughed. You laughed. That was just joking. I held up a hand. Don't, just don't. For the first time, Rachel didn't have a retort ready. No sigh, no sarcasm, just quiet. Later that day, she tried damage control. Texted her sister, called her aunt, reached out to her cousin who only visits when he needs a place to crash during college football season. But the warmth had cooled. The replies were delayed. The tone clipped. She didn't know, of course, that I'd written letters. Not angry ones, not emotional rants, just facts. Printed, signed, mailed. To every member of her family who ever thanked me through gritted teeth and whispered behind my back. Statements of payment, timelines, bank transfers, all the quiet financial weight I carried over the years, her father's assisted living, her mother's car repair, the emergency loan I gave her sister when she couldn't ask her husband, itemized and outlined like a polite audit of goodwill. No accusations, no insults, just the truth. Truth has a way of making people feel uncomfortable when they benefit from the lie. A week later, her cousin unfollowed her on Instagram. Petty, yes, but telling. Her mother stopped calling. Her sister's Facebook went oddly silent. At dinner one night, she'd tried to cook as if playing wife again might cast some spell over the unraveling. She sat across from me, fork toying with roasted potatoes she didn't eat. Did you have to embarrass me? She finally asked. I tilted my head. Did I? You made me look like I used you. I set down my fork. No, I said. You did that. She stood up so suddenly her chair screeched. Walked out. I heard the click of her heels on the stairs and the muffled slam of the bedroom door. But she didn't cry. Rachel never cried when she was guilty. She only cried when she was afraid. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, thumb moving slow, expression tight. She didn't look up when I poured my coffee. Your family hasn't changed, I said softly. They just finally got a look at the receipt. She opened her mouth to snap back, but nothing came out. She knew. They weren't angry at me. They were embarrassed by her. Because for years, they painted me as boring, passive, dependable to the point of invisibility. And now, when the invisible man pulled back, they realized how much weight he'd been holding up. Rachel hadn't lost a husband. She was beginning to lose her audience. And that scared her more than the silence. The panic didn't begin with a scream. It began with silence. Rachel came home holding a manila envelope like it might contain explosives. She didn't drop her purse or kick off her heels like usual. She walked straight to the dining room table, placed the envelope down, and stared at me while I buttered my toast. Tell me this isn't real, she said. I didn't look up. That depends on what this is. She slid the paper across the table with 2 fingers like it was tainted. The letterhead was from the Registrar's Office for Small Businesses. It confirmed the transfer of a 12% stake Rachel's stake in a boutique interior design firm she'd once co-founded with a friend from Pilates, the same stake I'd helped her acquire 6 years ago when she didn't have the credit score to sign a damn lease on her own, the same business she forgot about until tax season every year. Now it was mine again. Her name removed, mine restored. She sat down slowly, like her knees suddenly felt like glass. I don't understand. This isn't a joke, right? I finally looked up. Nope, that's the updated filing. Took them longer than usual. You can't just take it, she snapped. You gifted that to me. I reached into the drawer beside me, pulled out a folded slip of paper, and placed it beside her wine glass from the night before. You signed the transfer 2 months ago. She stared. I signed this? You did. When? I shrugged. You were sitting on the couch, scrolling. I said I needed you to sign a few forms for the quarterly reports. You didn't ask questions, just tapped your initials and said something about Thai food taking too long. Her face paled. You tricked me. No, I said, standing up, voice sharper now than it had been in weeks. You betrayed me. She froze. I walked to the sink, rinsed my plate, and set it down. I followed through, that's all. Her voice cracked. That was my stake. My name's on the website. Not anymore, I said without turning. She went quiet again. Not the stunned kind, no, this was calculation. I could feel her shifting, mentally counting the marbles she still thought she had in her corner. This is illegal, she finally said, clinging to a thread of certainty. Then sue me, I offered, drying my hands. Her breath hitched. You don't think I will? I hope you do, I said. And this time, I turned to face her, because here's the part she forgot. I helped build that business from the ground up. Her friend brought the ideas. Rachel brought the Pinterest boards. I brought the licensing, the capital, the permits, the insurance. I was the one who sat in the fluorescent office at 9 p.m. explaining to the IRS why a design studio was filing taxes like a restaurant because Rachel thought codes were just suggestions. She used to call me the silent partner. She didn't realize I took that literally. She left the table and went to the den where she used to keep the old paper copies of the business forms. I'd cleaned them out last week, just in case. She stormed back in, breath shallow. You can't just erase me from everything. Not everything, I said, sitting back down. Just the things you took for granted. She started pacing now. Her words began to unravel. You're doing this to punish me. This isn't transition. This is revenge. I tilted my head. If I wanted revenge, Rachel, you'd already be renting a one-bedroom next to your creative consultant and wondering why your credit score suddenly dropped 70 points. Her lips parted like she was going to defend him, but then she closed them. Probably the first smart move she made all week. She sat down again, more slowly this time, but the confidence was gone. That superior tilt of the chin, the subtle smirk she wore when she thought she still had the upper hand. It was evaporating. She was finally seeing it, the picture I'd been painting in slow, steady brushstrokes while she played her affair like a love song only she could hear. Rachel always thought paperwork was my crutch, that spreadsheets and folders and account numbers were my way of clinging to control because I lacked passion. But paperwork doesn't lie. Signatures don't flirt with other men. Documents don't go cold in bed. Paperwork just waits, and then it speaks. Now every comfort she'd used to cushion her guilt, the money, the business, the passive husband, was slipping away, and not because I slammed doors or raised my voice, because I filed, because I notarized, because I remembered every favor, every line crossed, every date. Rachel walked out of the room that night without speaking. No plate clattered, no threats followed. Just the quiet sound of a woman realizing she's not in control anymore, not even close. And that's when panic sets in, not when the fight starts, but when the person you underestimated stops pretending they're losing. The envelope arrived mid-morning on a Thursday, white, crisp, bearing the letterhead of a local law firm she vaguely recognized but never had reason to care about. It wasn't bulky, didn't scream drama, it looked almost boring, polite even. I was in the backyard, sanding the old bench swing she once claimed she loved, but hadn't sat on in years. I saw her through the kitchen window, watching her fingers tear at the seal, her eyes scanning faster and faster, lips moving silently as if her brain couldn't keep up with the legal language calmly dismantling her sense of control. She didn't say a word to me, 2 hours later, tires screeched down the driveway. Not a goodbye, not a slammed door, just the echo of a woman who had officially lost the thread. She showed up at the law office unannounced, still in her yoga pants and hoodie, sunglasses shoved into her hair like a crown of misplaced certainty. The receptionist smiled with that rehearsed calm that lawyers' offices breed in the face of fraying people. "I need to speak to Robert Hartwell," she said. "Now." She waited 20 minutes in a fake leather chair across from a ficus plant and a bowl of Werther's Originals. By the time she got called in, she'd worked herself into a pace, lip bitten, phone untouched for once, hands twitching. Mr. Hartwell, 60, patient, the kind of man who'd been paid to watch people unravel, offered her seat and a glass of water. She declined both. "Is this about the separation?" she asked, slapping the letter onto his desk. He didn't flinch, just folded his hands and nodded. "Yes, I didn't agree to this. None of this. These asset changes, the trust restructuring, that house, my company's stake." He raised a hand gently. "Mrs. Whitmore, this isn't new. Your husband has been working with us for over a year." She blinked. "A year?" "Yes," he said, with the tone you'd use to explain gravity to a child. "None of these adjustments were sudden. They were strategic, planned, documented." She gaped. "But I didn't sign divorce papers." He gave her a small, tight smile. "This isn't a divorce proceeding. This is financial restructuring, all within his rights. All pre-approved by documents you signed, most of them before you announced your intention to pursue an independent path." Rachel felt the floor tilt beneath her. "I never announced." "You did," he said, still calm. "Not in court, but to your husband. That's all that mattered." He reached into a drawer, produced a file, and opened it like he was reading off a lunch order. "House, purchased, pre-marriage, returned to sole ownership through trust protection. Business stake, legally transferred with notarized consent. Vehicle titles, split according to contribution. Emergency savings, moved into an irrevocable trust 6 months ago with your written approval." She stood, swaying. "This is some kind of trick. He manipulated me." Mr. Hartwell looked up, unblinking. "Mrs. Whitmore, respectfully, he anticipated you." She didn't remember leaving the office, couldn't recall walking to the car or pulling out into traffic. She sat in the parking lot with the AC on full blast, the leather seats burning her thighs, her palms damp, gripping the steering wheel like it might keep her tethered to the life she once understood. For 20 years, she told herself she had the upper hand, that I was the safe one, the simple one, that she was the storm, and I was the dock, too slow to catch fire, too dependable to retaliate. But I had been moving for a long time. Just quietly. She helped me. That was the part that made her nauseous. She initialed the accounts I suggested. She agreed to restructure the business. Just for clarity. She signed the forms I handed her with dinner, while she texted Ethan under the table and asked if we still had that one bottle of red she liked. And all this time I was preparing. Not for war, not for vengeance. For escape. The kind of escape where you don't run screaming from the house. You walk away with the deed in your name and your dignity fully intact. When she came home that night, she didn't slam the door. She walked past me, silent, while I was reading on the porch. She paused briefly, as if to say something, but what do you say to the man you thought you'd left behind, only to find out he'd been 2 steps ahead all along? She went inside. I turned the page. She still hadn't realized the scariest part. I hadn't even started dismantling her illusions yet. I was simply showing her the floor plans. By the time October rolled around, Rachel had stopped coming home smelling like overpriced perfume and Pinot Noir. She started coming home with silence clinging to her like static. No humming, no smug glances, no fake yoga stories about how liberated she felt. Just quiet, deflated, heavy, cautious. The glow was gone. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. I saw it in the way she winced when her phone buzzed. In how often she left texts unanswered, how her laughter over video calls disappeared completely. I saw it when she stood outside on the patio one night, talking in low, tight tones to someone who clearly wasn't saying what she wanted to hear. Ethan, our imaginary Casanova, wasn't quite living up to the brochure. I'd done my research. He'd been out of full-time work since April, drifting from consulting gig to consulting gig, often funded by whoever he was currently creatively connecting with. Rachel wasn't the first, just the latest. He didn't have roots. He had playlists. Apparently, once she lost the illusion of risk-free rebellion and started asking about next steps, the shine wore off. One night, she left the house and returned 45 minutes later. Not enough time for dinner, barely enough for an argument. She walked into the kitchen like a child after detention, looking for comfort but unwilling to admit she'd earned the punishment. I was at the table going over estate documents. Nothing dramatic, just updates, adjustments, life changes. She stood there for a long moment before finally saying, "Maybe we should talk." I didn't look up. "We talked." She stepped closer. "You never told me how you felt about... You didn't listen." Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked around the kitchen like she didn't recognize it anymore. The same counters she once leaned against while sipping wine and lying. The same table where we used to plan holidays she now spent texting him under the table. She sat down, slow, deliberate. "I made mistakes," she said softly. "I'm aware. I thought..." She trailed off. "I thought there'd be more time." There was. Silence. She tried again, voice barely above a whisper. "Did you ever love me?" That question didn't sting. It didn't make me wince or look away. It didn't unearth something buried. It just clarified. I looked at her then. Really looked. And I remembered. I remembered the woman who used to dance barefoot in the living room when the weather turned warm, who made pancakes in her robe and sang badly to Fleetwood Mac while we painted the hallway together. I remembered the one who once drove 2 hours just to surprise me with lunch during a miserable work trip, the woman who whispered, "I believe in you," when I started my own business. That woman? "I loved who you were," I said, "before you needed more." She blinked. That line, simple, quiet, hit her harder than any shouted insult could have. Her shoulders folded inward. She looked down at her hands like they didn't belong to her. "I don't know what happened," she said. "I do," I replied. And I stood, left her at the table, because nothing else needed to be said. The next few days, she tried to re-engage in little ways, asked if I wanted coffee, mentioned the weather, left a bottle of my favorite bourbon on the counter like it might erase a year's worth of deceit. I accepted none of it. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. She had leapt into another man's arms because she thought mine weren't holding her tightly enough. But it turned out his were slippery, unreliable. His words weren't vows, they were distractions. Now she was drifting in a vacuum of her own making. The safety net had vanished, and the tightrope she walked on was fraying. And I was done offering safety. The difference between a lifeboat and a dock is simple. One waits. The other leaves when the storm is over. She had made her choice. I had made mine. The charity gala was an annual event Rachel never missed. Something about velvet gowns and cameras fed her need to still feel seen. A performance in heels, all posture and perfected laugh. For years, I stood beside her at these things like a piece of furniture in a rented tux, sipping overpriced wine while she floated from donor to donor, introducing me as Michael, my better half, or at least the quieter one. This year, she arrived alone. She hadn't planned to, I hadn't RSVP'd, and in her mind, I'd surely be too proud or too broken to show my face. After all, wasn't I the abandoned husband, the poor guy in the guest room, watching her move on in slow motion? She walked in, wearing a navy gown that clung to the version of herself she was still trying to project. Hair perfect, makeup immaculate, smile too tight to be real. She expected a few pity stares, maybe a whisper here or there. What she didn't expect, what stopped her in her tracks, was seeing me across the room. I was standing by the bar, talking with the mayor and 2 city board members. Real conversation, not small talk, not the obligatory pleasantries people toss to the socially invisible. I was laughing, genuinely, engaged, present, the kind of presence she hadn't noticed in years because she assumed I never left the background. She stayed at the edge of the room for a while, unsure whether to approach or disappear. Then came the first quiet cut. A woman she vaguely recognized, one of the gala sponsors, mid-50s, tastefully dressed, approached her with a warm smile. "Oh, Rachel, it's been a while. I didn't know you were still connected to Michael." Rachel blinked. We're married." The woman smiled gently. "Of course. I just meant he's really come into his own, hasn't he? So composed, dignified." Rachel nodded slowly, like swallowing something bitter without water. Later, she heard a pair of young council aides whispering by the hors d'oeuvres. "Is that Michael Whitmore?" "Yeah, that's him." "Didn't his wife?" "Yeah, but he handled it with such class." Rachel turned before they saw her. She caught a glimpse of me again, now chatting with the director of the local historical society, one of those conversations that carry weight in small cities, the kind that leads to quiet influence and open doors. I was shaking hands, making people laugh, not selling anything, just being. That was the part she never saw coming. She thought her absence would leave a void, that by walking away, the world would tilt in her direction and I'd spin off, untethered, forgotten. But instead, I filled the space she vacated, not with noise, not with attention seeking, not with a rebound relationship splattered across social media. I built something better. Reputation. There's a kind of power that doesn't make headlines, but settles in behind closed doors. Respect earned through restraint. When you don't scream, when you don't sling mud, when you just move forward with intention. That night I said hello to her. Briefly, politely. I even complimented her dress. She looked good. She always did when she tried. But her eyes gave her away. She wasn't glowing anymore. She was searching for anchors, for allies, for someone who remembered her the way she wanted to be remembered. And I was done being her mirror. The final sting came near the coat check. A retired judge, someone Rachel had tried to impress years ago, turned to me as we waited for our jackets. "Michael, your speech earlier was thoughtful, precise. If you ever consider a run for office, let me know." I smiled, thanked him, and glanced over at Rachel. She was standing a few feet away, alone, pretending to read something on her phone that wasn't lighting up. Someone nearby asked just loud enough for her to hear, "Didn't they used to be married?" I answered without turning, "We had a good run." She left before dessert was served. Out in the parking lot, her heels echoed on the pavement like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence she hadn't written. She unlocked her car, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there for a long moment. Hands on the steering wheel, headlights off. No tears, just realization. She'd traded a quiet protector for a loud promise, and now that promise was nowhere to be seen, while the man she thought was fading had become unforgettable. She found it by accident. A month after the gala, while rearranging the bookshelf she used to call cluttered, Rachel pulled out The Places That Scare You, a book I'd given her back in our early days, back when she still admitted to being afraid of things. She always said she'd read it someday. She never did. This time the weight felt off, a thin bulge beneath the back cover. She opened it, and there it was, a plain white envelope, unsealed, with her name written in my handwriting. Inside, a folded letter and a check. The check came first. It was drawn from one of the accounts I'd moved long before she noticed. The amount, precisely half of her original savings, the same money she contributed when we combined our accounts 20 years ago. Adjusted for inflation, calculated to the dollar, no legal obligation, no court order, no request, just a return. She blinked. Once, twice, as if the numbers would change if she stared long enough. Then the letter. It was handwritten, not typed, not lawyered, just in blue ink, in the voice she once claimed she loved, because you always think before you speak. "Rachel, I wanted to react. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw plates, accuse you, chase you down every rabbit hole of your lies. But then I remembered who I used to be before you stopped seeing me, and I realized something. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. So I chose silence. I chose action. And I chose to disappear from the version of myself you needed to outgrow. Inside this envelope is half of what you brought into our life together, not because I owe it, but because you did contribute once. Before the detachment, before the justifications, before Ethan, I return it now, not as closure, but as confirmation. You're free now, just like you wanted, Michael." She didn't cry. Rachel had long since passed the point of drama. What settled over her instead was that dull, hollow stillness, the one that creeps in when the consequences are too complete to fix and too quiet to rage against. Because in the end, I hadn't destroyed her. I hadn't slandered her to friends. I hadn't frozen her out of accounts. I hadn't told her family the worst parts of her affair, the humiliating parts she'd never admit, the photos she left in the cloud folder she forgot was shared. No, I released her on my terms, And that is a different kind of loss, one you can't explain to friends over wine, one that doesn't get sympathy because she got what she wanted. She got her freedom, but not the audience, not the forgiveness she assumed would come when I got past the hurt, not the redemption arc, not the chase. She never realized how terrifying a calm goodbye can be until she read those words, sitting alone on the edge of a bed we hadn't shared in almost a year, holding a check that felt more like a certificate of exile. There were no more texts from Ethan, no more plans, no more stories to tell her sister about how I just shut down. Because now everyone knew I didn't shut down. I walked away. And I made sure the last thing she felt wasn't abandonment, it was release, the kind you never come back from.